and welcome to the 54th episode of Jazzology, presented by Savage Content. I'm your host, Willard Jenkins, and we're here alternating Fridays, giving two jazz fans the opportunity to compete against each other for a chance to win $100. Each contestant will be asked a question worth 2 points. If they're unable to answer correctly, their opponent will have a chance to steal the question for 1 point. We'll ask 10 questions, and at the end of the 10 questions, the person with the lowest score will get a bonus question for the opportunity to tie the score, no matter how far they're behind in the score. If they're successful, the game will go to sudden death. In sudden death, the person in the lead at the end of regulation will go first, and each contestant will take turns trying to answer the sudden death multiple choice question until we have a winner. And now let's meet this week's contestants. Our reigning Jazzology champion is Matt Merewitz. Matt Merewitz is founder and director of Fully Altered Media, in business since 2007. Matt has become known as one of the most in-demand publicists and consultants in the world of creative music. Matt resides an hour north of New York City with his wife, daughter, and a chocolate Labradoodle named Sunny. Our challenger for today's 54th episode of Jazzology is Paul Cavalconte. Paul calls 3 New York City public radio stations home. WNYC, where he hosts New Standards on Saturday nights, WQXR for weekend morning classical music programs, and Eclectic Rock on WFUV on Sunday night's Cavalcade. Paul's long radio career in and around New York brought him to a variety of formats and legendary stations, including WLIR, WNEW, WNCN, Q104.3, CD101.9 and WRXP, plus the pre-XM merger years of Sirius Satellite Radio, and curating the vinyl experience station on iHeartRadio. And now, let's get to today's Jazzology. And as our reigning champion, Matt Merewitz goes first. You ready, Matt?
Sure, yep.
All right, Matt. Which of the following jazz greats is not, and I emphasize, is not originally from the Carolinas? Would that be A, James Moody, B, John Coltrane, C, Thelonious Monk, D, Dizzy Gillespie, or E, Max Roach?
Okay, so I know John Coltrane was born in High Point, North Carolina. I'm pretty sure Monk is from the same region as Coltrane because I believe I read that in his great biography by Robin D.G. Kelly. This is hard because I think that I have a feeling that this is very hard. Dizzy Gillespie wrote that song, Salt Peanuts, but I think he was actually from South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that Max Roach was also from North Carolina, I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to go with James Moody. I think that's my answer.
Yes, indeed. That is correct. James Moody is the only one of those jazz greats who is not from the Carolinas. James Moody from Savannah, Georgia.
Right.
All right, Paul.
Yeah.
Your turn. Paul, what singer began her association with bebop by singing with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie in the Billy Eckstine Band? Would that have been A, Ella Fitzgerald, B, Betty Carter, C, Sarah Vaughan, D, Anita O'Day, or E, none of the above?
Well, what's interesting about this choice is that I can toggle between Betty Carter, which is a guess, or E, none of the above, which is also a guess. So I'm going to be an optimist and go with Betty Carter.
Well, that is incorrect. So Matt will have a chance to steal the question. Matt, what singer began her association with bebop by singing with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie in the Billy Eckstine Band? Was that A, Ella Fitzgerald? B, Betty Carter has been eliminated, although she was known as Betty Bebop. C, Sarah Vaughan? D, Anita O'Day, or E, none of the above?
This is not my. I mean, I love the Billy Eckstine Band, and actually, he's a incredibly, in modern times, underrated figure in bebop and early jazz, early big band music. I really have no idea, and since I don't associate Ella with Billy Eckstine, definitely associate her with Chick Webb. Anita O'Day seems like it could be the case because, like, I'm not sure. So I'm going to go with E, none of the above.
That is incorrect as well. The correct answer to that question is C, Sarah Vaughan.
You see that? And she worked and made records with Mr. B. So it was right under our noses. How did we miss that?
She did do that. That's right. That was the key, the clue. Well, Matt, you're next. Matt, name the Chicago saxophonist who established the Velvet Lounge as a place for jazz in 1983. Would that have been A, Von Freeman, B, Roscoe Mitchell, C, Fred Anderson, D, Donald Boykin, or E, Ari Brown?
Well, I know that the Velvet Lounge was a club in the south side of Chicago, South Loop of Chicago. I think, yeah. And actually, a good friend of mine booked it for a while. In the early 2000s, shout out to Dan Melnick, not the Newport, Saratoga Dan Melnick, but the Chicago Dan Melnick. And that would have been C, Fred Anderson.
That is correct. Fred Anderson did indeed found and start the Velvet Lounge on the south side of Chicago as a place for jazz in 1983. Okay, Matt's up 4-0. Time to catch up, Paul. Paul, the noted, now defunct, former great jazz club called the Smiling Dog Saloon was located in what city? Was it A, Chicago, B, Pittsburgh, C, Buffalo, D, Cleveland, or E, Cincinnati?
It's going to be a wild guess as I'm not familiar with it. So I'm going to say Chicago only because it's the jazziest of these four lovely jazz cities, five actually.
That's incorrect. Matt with a chance to steal the point. Matt, the noted, now defunct, former great jazz club called the Smiling Dog Saloon was located in what city? A, Chicago has been eliminated. B, Pittsburgh. C, Buffalo. D, Cleveland. Or E, Cincinnati?
Okay, so I've never heard of the Smiling Dog. saloon. I will say that I think this is a Willard Jenkins specialty, because all these towns are associated with the Midwest, and of course we all know that Willard began his life and his career in Ohio, or was it Western Pennsylvania, Willard?
I'll reveal that later.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to have a guess here. I know that Willard was long associated with the Cleveland Tri-City Jazz Festival, so I don't know any jazz clubs in Cincinnati. I mean, there's one that comes to mind that if you said it to me, it might have the word blue in it. But I think I'm going to go with Cleveland just because of the association with Mr. WVJ over here. Cleveland.
That is correct. And that was a correct assumption, Matt. So you're up next. Matt, which of the following legendary jazz radio DJs had a tune written for them by Thelonious Monk? Would that have been A, Dick Buckley, B, Symphony Sid Torrin, C, Mort Vega, D, Oscar Treadwell, or E, Daddy O'Daly?
Well, the song that immediately comes to mind is An Oscar for Treadwell by Thelonious Monk, but I think that's by Thelonious Monk. I don't instantly know. And when you said the question, I was thinking, oh, it's Symphony Sid. That had to be, the guy. And I feel bad taking this away from Paul because this is his perfect, given his profession and whatnot. But I've never heard of Daddy O'Daly. I should know. I've heard, of course, of Mort Vega on the West Coast. Dick Buckley. Yeah, that name rings a bell. Maybe in D.C.
Chicago.
Okay. But yeah, I'm going to go with An Oscar for Treadwell, D.
That is correct. And the tune actually that Monk wrote for Oscar Treadwell was called Oscar T, which Oscar did use as one of his themes. But An Oscar for Treadwell was written by Charlie Parker.
Oh, wow.
So this week's mid-show break is brought to you by a new podcast for jazz buffs. It's called Savage Movie Night Podcast. Each episode explores a film's production, plot, actors, behind-the-scenes issues, and curious facts behind films that impacted, or in some cases should have impacted, American culture. Led by three hosts from three different generations, Savage Movie Night Podcast is available now on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and other leading podcast services. So grab some popcorn and subscribe now. All right. And now's the portion of the program where we ask each of our contestants a question related to their relationship with jazz. And Paul, since you are new, this is your first time, we will ask the first time contestants standard question. And that is, Paul, tell us, how did you fall in love with jazz?
78 RPM records, because my parents had them, and I had a player, and I was fascinated with them. And I can remember as a kid, in particular, being mesmerized by Count Basie Jumping at the Woodside. I played that on the Decca Black and Gold label over and over and over and committed every note to memory. There was a lot of big band jazz mostly. The discovery of deeper jazz from the bebop era on would come as I graduated to LPs. But it really was 78s, and it was the swing era, I think. And it also anchored me very much in American songbook, writing, which I learned, those songs, those basic songs from that.
All right. Well, Matt, you've answered that particular question previously, but tell us, Matt, what jazz have you heard lately that really excites you?
Well, I have to keep it kosher, not any clients. So I'm gonna say I was recently at the Big Ears Festival, and I saw a duo of Christian McBride and Brad Meldow, and they played an incredible version of Estate that was just mind-boggling beautiful. They also did Pen Up House by Sonny Rollins, and it was just it was incredible. Another show that I recently saw was actually a duo performance by the Chicago Underground Duo, which is Rob Mazurek on trumpet and Chad Taylor on drums and mbira, and it was incredible. Two totally different things. That was actually part of the Long Play Festival in Brooklyn, put on by Bang in a Can. So yeah, those were two really excellent things.
Speaking of duos, our record of the week is a record that's been out for a minute. It's the very sublime duo recording of the late pianist Jerry Allen and the guitarist Kurt Rosenwinkel, and it's titled A Lovesome Thing on Motema. So check that one out. And Paul, you're up next. Paul, who wrote the book titled The Jazz Cadence of American Culture? Would that have been A, Robert O'Mealy, B, Art Lang, C, John Zwed, D, Mark Myers, or E, Howard Mandel?
Well, regrettably, since I do not know how to read, I've never heard of the book or any of those writers. So I will just pick Art Lang because I can pronounce his name.
You'll pick, and you say you pick A, B, Art Lang?
Yeah.
Okay. That's incorrect. Matt, with a chance to steal the point. Matt, who wrote the book titled The Jazz Cadence of American Culture? Was that A, Robert O'Mealy, B, Art Lang has been eliminated, C, John Zwed, D, Mark Myers, or E, Howard Mandel?
So I know all of Howard Mandel's books. He definitely did not write this book. Not a title that I associate with him whatsoever. Art Lang was the editor of Downbeat in the 80s, I believe, maybe 70s too, or part of the 80s. I don't actually know of any books that Art wrote. I know that he wrote one, but I don't know any by name. John Swed is most closely associated with both Sun Ra and I believe to some extent Ellington, although he wrote that book where it was like 3 examples of genius. I don't exactly recall, but I think I also associate John with Monk to some extent, although he wrote a book on just about jazz generally. Mark Myers, I see Mark Myers as like a very deep specialist in in a certain realm of jazz, a kind of classic jazz that the only reason I'm gravitating towards A, Robert O'Mealy, is because Robert is a professor at Columbia University, I believe, and he is a American Studies generalist who has a particular interest in jazz. And I think that it's most likely that since he's an academic and these other guys are not affiliated with John Swed was at Yale for a while and then Columbia and then UPenn, so that could be it. But I'm going to go with A, Robert O'Mealy.
That is correct. It was Robert O'Mealy And that was a good breakdown as far as determining who it was. It was Robert O'Meally who wrote the book, The Jazz Cadence of American Culture.
Can you tell me quickly what Art Lang wrote, if anything?
You know, Art Lang wrote a book, but I can't recall the title, to be honest with you. But
okay.
he did write a book, and you were right. He was the editor of Downbeat during the 80s.
Right. Okay.
Okay, Matt, your turn again. Matt, what jazz writer wrote the compilation book titled Victory is Assured? Would that have been A, Greg Tate, B, Robin D.G. Kelly, C, Stanley Crouch, or it should be D, Stuart Nicholson?
Oh my God. Oh, well, I know it's not Greg Tate because he's famous for Flyboy and the Buttermilk. Robin D.G. Kelly is famous for his Monk book, but also, I believe, a book more generally about American culture and black music, I think. Stuart Nicholson is known for his championing of the European community as the kind of most relevant of the modern era, although I think he's kind of maybe moved back a little bit from that thesis since the book was published, as I understand it. That only gives a little bit of context. I mean, the title itself kind of lends itself to the spirit of Stanley Crouch, because he is, he was such a charismatic and polarizing individual, and he did have this campaign, so to speak, associated with Wynton Marsalis to kind of have this. It was during what they call the Jazz Wars of the 90s, and it was like, we're going to assert this kind of mainstream Afrocentric notion of jazz and, blues-based music and kind of. So, I mean, the only reason it's got the swagger of Stanley Crouch. Obviously, Greg Tate had a lot of swagger himself, but I think I'm going to go with Stanley Crouch.
You're batting pretty good today. Your batting average is pretty good today, Matt. It indeed was Stanley Crouch, and that Victory is Assured was actually a salutation that he used to close out letters and whatnot.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he wrote VIA. I never knew.
Exactly.
I never knew what that meant. Yeah.
All right, Paul, you're up next. Paul, what jazz critic and author once headed the Jazz and American Culture program at the Smithsonian Institution? Would that be John Edward Hassey, B, Martin Williams, C, Gunther Schuller, D, Dan Morgenstern, or E, Nat Hentoff?
I'll go with Hentoff.
You'll go with E, Nat Hentoff? That's incorrect. So your turn to steal again, Matt. What jazz critic and author once headed the Jazz and American Culture program at the Smithsonian Institution? Was that A, John Edward Hassey, B, Martin Williams, C, Gunther Schuller, D, Dan Morgenstern, and E, Nat Hentoff has been eliminated?
So I actually worked for John Edward Hassey as an intern. I don't know if that's the first time I met you, Willard, but it might have been. I was in the Jazz Appreciation Month program that he founded at the Smithsonian. I think this is I feel like it's a trick question or something. I most closely associate Martin Williams with the Smithsonian collection of classic jazz. But I don't know if it's him or if it's Hasse. And I don't know. I know that Martin Williams was a critic, and I know of that, or maybe he was I don't know. For me, it's definitely between Hasse and Williams. What is the title again? Can you repeat the title?
The title is Jazz and American Culture. That was the title of the program at the Smithsonian.
I mean, this is a guess, but I'm going to go with John Edward Hasse. A.
That's incorrect. So we move on to the next question. The correct answer for that question is Martin Williams. And you had it. You were on the cusp when you talked about the collection of classic jazz that Martin Williams produced for the Smithsonian. But you went with John Edward Hasse.
My former.
That was the trick part of that question.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, you're up next. The 5 tenor sax men who recorded 5 brothers for Prestige Records, included Stan Getz, Alan Eager, Zoot Sims, Brew Moore, and which of the following? Would that have been A, Al Cohn, B, Sal Nistico, C, Herbie Stewart, D, Flip Phillips, or E, none of the above?
It's interesting because I am close to this like my first saxophone teacher who was my first saxophone teacher who was a serious saxophone teacher, not in the music store or something, was this guy named Jim Carroll, who, as you know, Willard, is the now I think emeritus at head of jazz studies at George Mason University in Virginia, and was a alumnus of the Woody Herman Orchestra. Mm-hmm. All the players that you mentioned are, I think, maybe not Herbie Stewart, but definitely Al Cohn, Sal Nistico, Flip Phillips are all closely associated with the Woody Herman Band. I don't. So the question is, which is not? Which of these recorded with on Prestige? I'm sorry.
There were 5 tenor saxophonists who recorded the piece 5 Brothers for Prestige Records. Those 5.
Stan Getz, Alan Eager, Zoot Sims, Brew Moore.
Stan Getz, Alan Eager, Zoot Sims, Brew Moore, and which of the following? Was it A, Al Cohn, B, Sal Nistico, C, Herbie Stewart, D, Flip Phillips, or E, none of the above?
Well, I'm pretty sure that Al Cohn is the most closely associated with the Woody Herman Band and those specific players. But it's a flip between it's a toss-up between Al Cohn and Flip Phillips. My gut says Al Cohn, so I'm going to go with Al Cohn.
That is correct. It was indeed Al Cohn. So, Paul, you're up next. And keep in mind, Paul, you will have a chance to catch up on the bonus round. But you're up next, Paul. Pianist and vocalist Diana Krall is a native of what Canadian city? Is it A, Vancouver, B, Edmonton, C, Toronto, D, Quebec City, or E, none of the above?
Well, I'll give you a little clue into how it works in the DJ trade. That was Diana Krall. She's Canadian. Now here's somebody else. So that is information that I would not know offhand at all. And I'm going to go with Toronto.
That's incorrect. Matt, chance to steal the point. Matt, pianist and vocalist Diana Krall is a native of what Canadian city? Is it A, Vancouver, B, Edmonton, C, Toronto has been eliminated, D, Quebec City, or E, none of the above?
So I think this is a trick question. I'm pretty sure. I know Diana Krall's from the west coast of Canada. I think I know that. I'm pretty sure of that. So it can't be Quebec City or Edmonton. I mean, that is further away, and it can't be Toronto. So that would leave Vancouver, but I actually don't think she's from the city of Vancouver. I think she's from a nearby town that's not Vancouver, but I can't remember the name. So I'm not sure if I'm going to lose on a technicality here, but I'm going to go with E, none of the above.
That is the correct answer. Because as you surmised, Diana Krall is from Nanaimo, British Columbia, a town near Vancouver. So that takes us to the bonus round, where our trailer, Paul, can catch up immediately by answering this question correctly. Paul, the winner of the recently released 2024 Jazz Journalists Association Jazz Poll Jazz Award for trombone was which of the following? Was that A, Steve Turre, B, Wycliffe Gordon, C, Trombone Shorty, D, Michael Dees, or E, none of the above?
Well, since Jazz Fest just happened, let's go with Trombone Shorty.
That is correct. And in one fell swoop, you have tied the score. So that takes us to sudden death.
How is that possible?
That's the way it works with Jazzology.
Gotcha. Okay.
The tune titled The Chase on Dial Records was a legendary battle between which two tenor saxophone players? Was it A, Dexter Gordon and Sonny Rollins, B, Ben Webster and Lester Young, C, Lester Young and Herschel Evans, D, Dexter Gordon and Wardell Gray, or E, Stan Getz and Zoot Sims?
Okay, so it has to be Dexter Gordon, because I know Dexter Gordon recorded a record called The Chase. So that eliminates Ben Webster, that eliminates Lester and Herschel, that eliminates Stan Getz and Zoot Sims. So it's somewhere between A and D. It would have been a much more iconic record if it had been a record. It would have been a record that everyone knows, like everyone, if it were a duo between Dexter and Sonny. So I'm going to say D, Dexter Gordon and Wardell Gray. D.
That is correct. The Chase was recorded by Dexter Gordon and Wardell Gray. So congratulations to Matt Merewitz on winning our 54th episode of Jazzology. We encourage each and every one of you to try your hand to play Jazzology. And if anyone watching would like to become a contestant on Jazzology, click the link below and simply fill out the form. You must be 18 years old or older, and be sure to follow us on social media at Jazzology Trivia Show to get all the latest news and updates. Thanks so much to Matt and to Paul and to everyone who joined us for our 54th episode of Jazzology today. Remember, you can check out Jazzology every other Friday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you miss the show live, You can find the archive on the Savage Content YouTube channel. And we will catch you